I returned home after my final deployment expecting nothing grand, just maybe a familiar face at the gate. But no one came. No welcome sign. No hug. Not even a text. At first I told myself it was a mix-up. Maybe they thought I'd land later. Maybe someone got the date wrong. But the silence didn't end at the airport. I walked into my childhood home and found a wall of memories I wasn't part of. Birthday parties, baby announcements, graduations. Moments that should have included me. And they didn't. I hadn't just been forgotten. I'd been excluded, deliberately. And the worst part? No one thought it needed explaining. I've served 21 years. Faced gunfire, buried friends, missed every holiday and still came back proud. But nothing prepared me for the quiet betrayal of being erased by my own family. This isn't a war story. It's a homefront one. A story about silence, jealousy, and emotional distance that grew while I was halfway across the world fighting someone else's war, completely blind to the one forming back home. I needed answers. So I started digging. What I found was a tangled mess of resentment going back decades. Things that were never said, slights I didn't even know happened, and wounds they never let heal. Somehow my success became their bitterness. This story is about what happens when you come home and realize you were never really part of the picture in the first place. If you've ever been shut out by the people who should have stood beside you, this story's for you. Hit subscribe. Because the truth? It hurts. But it also sets you free. The air smelled like jet fuel and cheap coffee as I stepped off the plane. My final military flight home after 21 years in uniform. The walk down the concourse felt strange, almost surreal, like I was floating through a memory that didn't belong to me. This should have been a moment to breathe again. To exhale. Instead, I scanned the crowd with quiet hope, clutching my duffel as I searched for even one familiar face. But the crowd moved around me indifferent. A couple greeted each other with flowers. A kid held up a sign for his dad. A woman in heels rushed toward a soldier with tears in her eyes. I kept walking. No one came. By the time I reached the baggage claim, the sting had bloomed fully in my chest. Not a single call. Not even a text. I told myself maybe there was a delay. Maybe they'd forgotten the exact time. Maybe the group chat didn't work. The ride home was silent. I didn't want to text anyone first. I didn't want to look too eager, too desperate, like I needed proof someone cared. The Uber driver talked the whole way about football. I nodded along, watching my hometown crawl past the window like a museum display. It had changed. Or maybe I had. When we pulled up to the old house on Laurel Ridge, I felt a flicker of something. A balloon on the mailbox. I smiled, absurdly relieved, thinking maybe I'd misjudged everything. But the balloon wasn't for me. It was a leftover from my niece's birthday the week before. She had just turned 10. I wasn't invited. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside quietly, almost cautiously. My mother was in the kitchen, humming, slicing strawberries like it was any other day. When she saw me, she startled, eyes wide, hands frozen mid-cut. "Olivia, you didn't say you were coming today." I stood there, duffel on the floor, unsure how to answer. I had said. I'd emailed, called, even sent a postcard with my flight details. Maybe they hadn't checked. Or maybe they had. She hugged me, tight but brief. Then she went right back to the strawberries. In the living room there was a massive collage on the wall. Dozens of framed photos. I looked closer. Weddings. Barbecues. School plays. College graduations. My sister's baby shower. My brother's new boat. Me. One photo. Old. In uniform. Cropped. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I saw it. A photo from last year. My father's retirement party. The whole family there. Everyone. Except me. I didn't even know he retired. That night I lay awake in my childhood room. Same walls. Same creaky bed. But the trophies had been boxed up. The shelves now held books that weren't mine. My old things had been moved into storage or tossed. My life compartmentalized like it didn't belong here anymore. Over dinner they talked about everything and nothing. Local news, new neighbors, the rising cost of eggs. No one asked about my deployment. No one asked how I was doing. It wasn't just awkward. It felt intentional. I glanced around the table. My brother Daniel, now a successful realtor, spoke with pride about closing a deal. My sister Maddie gushed over her daughter's gymnastics win. My father talked about yard work. Not once did anyone say, "We missed you." The absence was loud. Later, I found myself in the garage, looking through old boxes like an archaeologist in her own life. I found scrapbooks, letters I'd written home, awards I'd mailed them from the field. Most were untouched. Then I found a folder. Thick, tucked between tax documents. Inside were printed emails, ones I'd sent over the years. Some unopened. Some marked with red pen. Notes in my mother's handwriting, too long. Boastful. Why does she keep reminding us she's important? I stood frozen. The room spun. This wasn't distance. It was dismissal. The next morning I decided I wouldn't keep pretending. I poured coffee, sat down across from my mother and asked plainly, why didn't anyone tell me about Dad's retirement? Or Maddie's baby shower? Or Daniel's wedding anniversary? She looked up slowly, sighed and said, because we figured you'd be too busy as usual. You didn't even invite me. We didn't want to pressure you. It's not like you ever came anyway. My mouth went dry. I felt like I was being scolded. Do you even want me around? I asked. She didn't answer. I went for a long walk that afternoon, down past the school, the library, the old park where we used to have 4th of July picnics. I tried to recall the last time I felt included in any of it. At the park I saw a mural, bright and new, full of handprints from local kids. In the center was a quote, "Home is where you are remembered." That stuck with me, because for the first time in my life I wasn't sure if this was home anymore. When I got back I asked Maddie outright, is there something I did? Did I offend someone? Disappoint someone? She hesitated. It's not just one thing. It's years of things. You left. You stayed gone. You didn't ask about our lives. You made everything about your career. I blinked. I was serving. I was deployed. I was. Yeah. And you made sure we knew it. You were the hero. The one everyone praised. We were just the ones who stayed. That night I finally cried. Not because I felt guilty, but because I realized something worse. They weren't proud of me. They resented me. And the scariest part? They always had. I spent the night in my old room, surrounded by the same wallpaper I helped my mom pick out when I was 12. Soft blue with tiny painted sailboats, already peeling at the corners. It should have made me feel safe. Instead, it felt like a carefully preserved museum exhibit of a girl who no longer existed. At breakfast, I didn't ask questions. I wanted to see if they'd offer anything up voluntarily. They didn't. Mom asked if I'd be applying for jobs soon. Dad mentioned lawn care like I hadn't just returned from my 4th deployment. Everything was stiff. Polite. Wrong. Later that afternoon, while everyone was out, Dad at his veterans meeting, Mom at church, I wandered into the living room. There was a new gallery wall beside the staircase. 9 neatly framed photos. Graduations. Vacations. Holidays. Not one included me. No one had taken the old family portraits down, though. I was still in the Christmas photos from before I enlisted. Still in that sun-bleached snapshot of me and my siblings at the beach, sand sticking to our arms like glitter. But everything after 2008? I'd vanished. I leaned in closer. My younger brother, Tom, smiling at his high school graduation. Then again at his college ceremony. I hadn't even known he went to university. My sister, Lily, cradling her newborn in a hospital bed. Our parents flanking her with grins wide enough to split their faces. I'd never met the baby. Didn't even know her name. They hadn't just failed to include me, they'd actively built a life without me. I stood there for a long time, like a stranger studying the lives of a family she didn't belong to. My pulse buzzed in my ears. I could have smashed the glass with one sweep of my elbow. But I didn't. I needed answers, not broken frames. That night I cornered Lily in the kitchen. She was making tea, humming to herself like everything was normal. Why didn't anyone tell me about Tom's graduation? I asked. She didn't look surprised. Just tired. We figured you were busy. I was in Kuwait. I had internet. You could have sent a message. It didn't feel like you wanted to be involved, she said softly, like that made it okay. My throat tightened. Why would you think that? You left Liv. And you stayed gone. Even when you were home it felt like you were visiting. Not part of this. Not really. I was serving, I said. Protecting the country. Protecting you. I didn't ask you to. Her words sliced straight through my spine. I backed away without another word, but that moment stayed lodged in my chest for the rest of the night. It wasn't about a missed graduation. It was about something deeper. Something rotting beneath the surface. Over the next few days I watched more closely. Heard more whispers. Tom avoided me entirely. Every time I came into a room he left. My mother filled silences with questions about my plans. Will you settle down now? Get a normal job? Like the last 2 decades were a detour from being a real person. But then I caught something, tiny, almost nothing. Mom was on the phone in the hallway, her voice low. I only heard 2 words clearly: she's digging. I wasn't meant to hear that. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just awkward adjustment. This was cover-up. And I was going to find out what exactly they'd buried while I was gone. I started digging, literally. I pulled boxes out of the attic. Photo albums. Letters. Things nobody had touched in years. That's when I found the envelope. It was thick, unmarked, and tucked beneath an old shoebox of Christmas cards. Inside were printed emails. Dozens of them. Threads going back to 2010. Sent between my father, mother, and a woman named Rebecca Lawson. That name stopped me cold. Rebecca had been my best friend in high school. Brilliant, rebellious, the kind of girl who wrote poems on her sneakers and got suspended for painting anti-war slogans on the gym walls. We drifted after I enlisted. She didn't believe in the military. Thought I'd sold out. What was she doing emailing my parents? I flipped through the pages. Most of it was vague, but one thread stood out. It was dated March 12, 2015, 2 weeks after my second deployment. Rebecca had emailed my parents about a blog post I'd written while overseas. It was about missing home. About feeling invisible even when I returned. I'd forgotten all about it. But in the email, Rebecca warned my parents that I sounded disconnected and angry, and that maybe it was time to pull back. What did that mean? Then came my mother's reply. Thank you for the heads up. We've already started keeping a bit of distance. It's better this way. It's better this way. Those words crushed something inside me. This wasn't miscommunication. This was planned exile. Even worse, someone I trusted had helped orchestrate it. That night I drove to Rebecca's bookstore downtown. It was late, but the light was still on in the back. I knocked once. Twice. She answered with a hesitant smile that faded the second she saw me. Olivia. It's been a while. Yeah, I said. 10 years, I think. We stood in the doorway in awkward silence. I found your emails, I said quietly. To my parents. Her eyes dropped. I figured you might. Why would you do that? She rubbed the back of her neck. You were different. After you enlisted. I don't know, it felt like you became someone else. Thought I was protecting you. Or them. I don't know anymore. You thought you were protecting me by helping them erase me? I didn't think they'd actually shut you out, she said. I thought if they gave you space maybe you'd come back whole. I stepped back. Her words didn't even sting anymore. They just echoed hollow and absurd. You don't get to decide how someone heals, I said. And you sure as hell don't get to decide who deserves to be remembered. Back at home, I confronted my parents the next morning. I laid the emails on the kitchen table like evidence in a courtroom. My mother's face fell. My father's jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. I gave everything for this country, I said. And you threw me away like I was inconvenient. My mother reached for my hand. I pulled it back. We didn't know how to connect with you anymore, she said. He came back. Harder. Quieter. It scared us. So you erased me instead? No, she whispered. We tried to protect ourselves. It was selfish. But we didn't know how else to handle it. They weren't lying. That's what made it worse. This wasn't malice. It was fear. Cowardice disguised as self-preservation. I left the house that day without saying goodbye. I needed time, space, truth. And I wasn't sure any of that lived in that house anymore. My father once told me silence is louder than shouting, because when people stop talking they've already stopped hoping. After the photos and the discovery of all those missed milestones, I felt like I was trying to rebuild a puzzle from memory, without the picture on the box. And as I sat in the living room that night, flipping through those photo albums with shaking hands, I kept asking myself the same question. What did I do to deserve being cut out of my own life? I wasn't naive. I knew my enlistment had upset people. My mother cried for weeks after I left. My sister Lauren hadn't spoken to me for almost a year when I first deployed. But I thought time and maybe a few medals had healed that wound. Clearly I was wrong. That morning, over cold coffee and even colder stares, I tried to breach the wall. My mother sat across from me, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug like she was sketching some invisible line. "Why didn't anyone tell me about Lauren's wedding?" I asked, not raising my voice. I didn't want to start a fight. I wanted the truth. She didn't look up. "You were overseas. We didn't want to worry you. You didn't even try to tell me." My dad, sitting beside her, cleared his throat. "There wasn't time. Everything moved fast." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You planned a wedding in 3 days?" Silence. Then my mother finally said what I think she'd been holding back for years. "Olivia, not everything is about you. You made your choices. So did we." That sentence landed like shrapnel. I left the table and went out back to breathe. The air was sharp with autumn. The trees had turned amber and red like they always did this time of year. It looked like home, but it didn't feel like it anymore. I couldn't sit in that house another second. I needed answers from someone who wasn't bound by politeness or shame. I drove across town to see Lauren. She lived in the same neighborhood we grew up in. Funny how that worked out. While I was getting sand in my boots and learning to fire weapons, she was building a life that somehow never needed me in it. When she opened the door, her expression froze. "Liv," she said it like a question, not a welcome. "Can we talk?" She hesitated. "Tow's not really a good. It's never a good time, is it?" I forced a smile. 10 minutes. That's all I need." She let me in. Her house smelled like cinnamon and baby powder. A little boy, my nephew I assumed, peeked at me from behind the couch. He looked about 4. I had never seen him before. "You didn't even tell me his name." Lauren followed my gaze, folding her arms. "What do you want, Liv?" "I want to know why I wasn't invited to your wedding. Why I wasn't told about him. Why you cut me out like I was a stranger." She sat down slowly, eyes on her hands. "Because you were gone, Olivia. Always gone. And when you were here, you weren't here. You never asked about my life. Never called unless it was your birthday or Mom's." I sat across from her, feeling my heart hammering against my ribs. "You think I didn't care? I think you chose the army over us. And after a while we stopped trying to compete." That stunned me. I didn't even know we were in a competition. She went on. "You don't know what it's like having a sister everyone praises for her medals and discipline while you're just trying to make ends meet and raise a kid." The bitterness in her voice was subtle, but it was there. Layered beneath years of being in the shadow of someone who never meant to cast one. "I didn't do any of it to prove something, Lauren. I did it because it was the only place I ever felt I belonged." Her expression softened, but she didn't apologize. "You belonged to the army. Not here. Not to us." That line stuck with me long after I left. Back in my car, I stared at the steering wheel, my hands motionless on the leather. I had come looking for a simple answer and found a complicated truth. It wasn't hate that had pushed them away, it was hurt. I drove aimlessly for an hour before pulling into the parking lot of a diner I used to love. The neon sign still buzzed like it did in high school. Inside, the booths were the same faded blue and the waitress still called everyone Han. I took a booth in the back and ordered a coffee. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the only lifeline I had left. The digital letters I used to send to myself during deployments. They were like journal entries. I read one from my 3rd tour. "They say the enemy is out there, but sometimes I think the real war is with the silence. With the quiet ache of being forgotten. I wonder if anyone misses me." I closed the phone. It hurt too much. The waitress brought my drink and left me alone. That night, I went to the motel on the edge of town instead of back home. I needed space. I needed perspective. I needed time to let the words Lauren said settle in my bones. I laid awake thinking about all the ways people let love become resentment. About how absence can be seen as abandonment even when it's meant as sacrifice. And about how sometimes coming home isn't about returning to people, but facing the damage absence leaves behind. I didn't know how to fix it yet. But for the first time in days I knew it wasn't just them who had walls up. I had some too. And if I wanted them to come down, I had to be the one to start. The days that followed the attic discovery were haunted by a strange tension in the air. I couldn't tell if it was just me imagining it, or if my presence was genuinely unsettling to them. Every conversation felt brittle. My sister Kate barely made eye contact. My mother was overly polite, too rehearsed. And my father, well, he was always somewhere else. mowing the lawn, tinkering with something in the garage, or claiming he had errands to run. Anything to stay out of the house. I started waking up earlier before anyone else stirred. The silence of the morning felt honest. There was no performance then, no forced smiles or stilted conversations. Just me, the sound of birds, and a faint creak of the house settling, like it too remembered all the years I'd missed. One morning I wandered out to the backyard. The swing set was still there, rusted now, with one seat missing. It had been the centerpiece of our childhood. Kate and I would play there for hours. But it looked forgotten now. Much like our bond. Something tugged at me to go inside the old shed by the fence. It had been locked up for years. I found the key in the junk drawer in the kitchen, the same place it had always been. The door groaned as it opened. Dust clouded the air. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw boxes stacked high with old books, tools, and photo albums. I pulled one out, sat down on an overturned crate, and opened it. There they were, dozens of photos. Birthdays. School plays. Vacations. Christmas mornings. Kate in a graduation robe. Mom blowing out candles. Dad holding a new grandchild I didn't even know existed. And I wasn't in any of them. It wasn't just my absence. It was that I had been replaced. In every image my name wasn't even mentioned. Where I might have once stood there were friends of the family, neighbors, even cousins who had drifted away. There was one photo that broke me. It was from a 4th of July barbecue. Everyone was gathered in the yard, smiling under fireworks. My chair, the one with my name stitched into the back, was there. But someone else was sitting in it. And Kate had her arm around them. They gave my place away. My space in the family had been filled, like a missing tile on a mosaic, and no one talked about the one that used to be there. I clutched the album to my chest and sat there until my fingers went numb. Later that afternoon I confronted my mom in the kitchen. I didn't yell. I just placed the album on the counter and opened it to that photo. Why didn't anyone ever send me these? She didn't answer right away. Instead she looked out the window and said, because it would have made it harder. Harder for who? For all of us. For you. I waited. You always had this idea that you were doing the right thing, Olivia, she said softly. Serving. Sacrificing. But the truth is, you were gone. For years. We couldn't keep holding everything together and also keep pretending that you were still part of it all. My voice caught. So you just erased me? She shook her head. No. We moved on. It's not the same thing. It feels the same. Kate came in halfway through the conversation. She glanced at the photo, then back at me. I told her not to keep those albums, she said flatly. I told her you'd take it the wrong way. I turned to her. The wrong way. How else am I supposed to take being cut out of my own life? You made your choices, Liv. You left. I enlisted. That's not the same as abandoning you. Kate crossed her arms. It was to us. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was spinning with things I should have said, could have said better. But I also realized something I hadn't before. They didn't just resent me for leaving. They resented me for thriving without them. I had purpose overseas. I had discipline. A community. And back here they were drowning in the mess of everyday life. Mortgages, broken relationships, job changes. I had a uniform and a rank. They had problems they didn't want to compare to my medals. But understanding that didn't soften the blow. The next morning I packed a bag. I wasn't leaving permanently, I just needed space. Before I walked out I found Kate alone in the living room, scrolling through her phone. I sat down across from her. I'm not trying to make you feel bad, I said. I just want to understand how we got here. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, it wasn't one thing. It was everything. The way Mom would talk about you like you were perfect. The way Dad would light up when your letter came. Even when you weren't here, you were the favorite. That wasn't my fault. I know, she whispered. But it still hurt. She didn't cry. Neither did I. But the weight in the room was thick. I drove to a nearby lake we used to visit as kids. Sat on the dock. Let my legs dangle off the edge. I started writing. Not in a notebook or a journal, but a letter. One I never planned to send. To the sister who resents me. To the mother who moved on without me. To the version of myself that believed serving meant sacrificing everything. I wrote until the sun dipped below the treeline. Until the paper soaked up tears I didn't know were falling. The lake was calm. Peaceful. Unlike the storm still unraveling inside me. That night I checked into a small motel near the highway. I needed distance, but I also needed answers. If this resentment stretched back years, if it wasn't just about my deployments, then where did it really begin? I called Aunt Carla, my mom's estranged sister. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. But if anyone could give me the unfiltered truth, it would be her. She picked up on the second ring. Olivia? Is everything okay? I hesitated. I don't know. And for the first time, I asked the question that had been circling my brain since the moment I walked into that house. What happened to us? Aunt Carla lived in a small town an hour outside the city, in a modest cottage tucked behind a line of oak trees. It was a house that had seen life, paint peeling, wind chimes tangled, a crooked mailbox with her name in faded letters. But there was something comforting about its imperfection. Like it had nothing left to prove. When she opened the door, she looked exactly as I remembered her. Short silver curls, piercing eyes, and a hug that made me forget I'd grown up. She didn't ask why I came. She just said, "Let's sit," and poured tea into mismatched mugs. I hadn't seen her since before my second deployment. She and my mother had a falling out years ago. Something about inheritance, responsibility, or maybe pride. No one ever gave me the full story. But now I needed hers. I slid a photo across the table. The one from the album. The barbecue. The empty chair. The new me. "I found this," I said. He picked it up, squinted. That was a rough summer." "What happened, Carla? Why does it feel like I was erased?" She sighed and set the photo down gently. "Because you were. Not out of hate. Out of pain. And guilt." I frowned. "Guilt." She nodded slowly. "Your mother never forgave herself for letting you go. You were always the strong one, driven, determined. She told herself you'd be fine. But when you left, a part of her cracked. And instead of facing it, she shut it off. Pretended like it was all okay. The rest of the family followed her lead. But Kate, she was here. Why didn't she say anything? She was just a teenager then. And the moment your mom shifted the narrative, Kate learned to survive by going along with it. She didn't know how to hold space for both her grief and her anger. So she picked one. The easier one. Silence sat heavy between us. "I thought I was doing something good," I whispered. "Something honorable." "You were." But no one told them how to be proud and broken at the same time. That night, Aunt Carla handed me a small box before I went to sleep. "I saved these," she said softly. "Figured one day you'd want them." Inside were over a dozen letters. My handwriting. My stamps. My addresses. But unopened. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "You sent them to your mom." Every few months. She couldn't bring herself to read them. I sat on the bed and held the stack like they were sacred. My words frozen in time. I opened the top one. The date read, April 19th, 2014. "Hey Mom. We're finally settled at the new base. It's dry, dusty, and I already miss rain. I had coffee today that tasted like burnt rubber, but I'm getting used to it. There's a kid here from Minnesota who's never seen the ocean. Can you believe that? Anyway, I hope you and Kate are okay. Tell her I miss her smart mouth. Love you." My throat closed. Each letter was a snapshot of a version of me that still believed I mattered. That someone on the other end would read these and smile. Instead, they'd been buried in a box. But I kept reading. Every one of them. "We found a dog near base. Skinny and scared. I named her Echo. Do you remember that lullaby you used to sing? I couldn't sleep last night and caught myself humming it. I'm sorry I didn't call on your birthday. We lost power. But I thought about you all day. Kay would love it here. The mountains are endless. Like they're hiding something. I'm still here. I'm still me. Please don't forget that." I didn't sleep. I read until the sun came up. And then I cried. The next morning, Carla made pancakes like nothing had happened. But I could barely eat. My hands kept brushing against the edge of the table, restless. Like they wanted to do something with all the feelings I was drowning in. "I need to ask you something," I finally said. "And I want the truth." She looked up. "All right. Why did you and Mom stop talking?" Carla hesitated. "Your dad got sick. It was before he told anyone. I found out first by accident. He came to me, needed advice. But your mom thought I was interfering. Said I was undermining her. We fought. I said things I shouldn't have. And she cut me off. She always did hate being questioned." "Yes. especially when she was scared. I nodded. She still is. Carla smiled sadly. So are you. I left that afternoon. I needed to go back, not for them but for me. To face the brokenness. To see if anything could be salvaged. When I arrived home, Kate was in the kitchen. She didn't look surprised to see me. I figured you'd come back, she said, sipping coffee. I went to see Carla. That caught her off guard. Why? Because I needed answers you wouldn't give. He set the mug down. And I read the letters. The ones Mom never opened. Her eyes widened. She told me she threw them out. No. Carla kept them. Every single one. Kate leaned against the counter, her expression unreadable. You were just kids, I said. You didn't know how to carry everything. But you could have told me. Even once. Kate looked at me, then away. I was mad at you, Liv. Not for leaving. But for making it look easy. It wasn't. I know that now. A beat passed. Then she said something I didn't expect. She read them. I blinked. What? Not when they arrived. But later. When Dad got worse. I caught her in the garage crying over one of them. He didn't want anyone to know. She felt like she didn't deserve to. My chest tightened. I thought hating you would protect me, Kate continued. But all it did was make me lonelier. That night I sat across from my mother at the kitchen table. I hurt you, I said. I left. I didn't write enough. I didn't call enough. She stared at her hands. But you hurt me too. You let them erase me. You made it seem like I never existed. Tears welled in her eyes. I was ashamed. Of me. No. Of myself. For being relieved that you were gone. For being jealous of the life you made without us. I was quiet. I opened them, she said. The letters. Years later. When your father couldn't remember your name anymore. I would read your words out loud to him. Over and over. I reached for her hand. And this time she didn't pull away. I missed you every day, she whispered. Even when I pretended I didn't. We didn't fix everything that night. We didn't hug and magically heal. But something cracked open. A window maybe. A door. The next morning I pinned one of the letters to the fridge. No explanation. No announcement. Just a reminder of the voice they tried to forget. Later that day Kate added a post-it beneath it. I remember this one. You mentioned Echo. I laughed for 10 minutes at the name. And for the first time in years I smiled in that house. I sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, my old room, staring at a photo I'd found in a dusty shoebox. I hadn't recognized the box before. It was hidden under my mother's sewing machine, behind a stack of old magazines. The kind of spot where forgotten things go to die quietly. But this photo? It was of my younger sister Emma standing on a high school stage holding a trophy. Her smile was electric. My parents beamed beside her. A moment of pride captured forever. What cut me wasn't the event. It was the date, June 15th. The day I'd been medevaced from Fallujah after taking shrapnel to my right shoulder. I'd been unconscious when I arrived at the field hospital, and when I woke up 2 days later, I asked if anyone had called my family. No one had. Looking at the date again I realized why. They were at a school auditorium while I was being stitched up on a cold metal table in Iraq. For years I'd rationalized that absence. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe the army hadn't reached them yet. But the smile on my mother's face in the photo told a different story. They weren't worried. They weren't even thinking about me. They'd moved on without hesitation. I didn't sleep that night. The photo stayed on the bed beside me like a silent witness. My thoughts tangled themselves into knots. I wanted to believe that they loved me. I wanted to believe that this was all just a misunderstanding, a tangle of timing and poor communication. But now I was starting to see the pattern for what it really was. A choice. Emma hadn't done anything wrong. She'd grown up with a sister who was always away, always praised in local papers, always a topic of conversation at church. Olivia's overseas again serving her country, they'd say. What a hero. I'd unintentionally stolen the spotlight. And instead of diffusing it, my parents sharpened it. They let it blind them. Emma's achievements were never compared to her own efforts. They were always measured against mine. No wonder she resented me. And no wonder my parents began tiptoeing around my existence, erasing me from photo albums, dinner conversations, and holiday traditions. Not to hurt me but to survive the tension I never knew I'd caused. The next morning I found Dad in the garage sanding an old wooden cabinet. His hands moved with that familiar, methodical rhythm. I watched for a moment before saying anything. "Did you know I almost bled out in 2012? I asked flatly. He didn't turn around. I was in Fallujah. We were ambushed. I took shrapnel across my chest and shoulder. They said another hour and I would have died." Still silence. Just the rasp of sandpaper. "June 15th, I continued. "You remember where you were that day?" His hand paused. Then resumed. "Emma's state debate finals," he said quietly. "She won. Your mother was so proud." I waited, hoping for something, an apology, a flicker of guilt. But he just kept sanding. I walked away without another word. I spent the afternoon pulling down boxes from the attic. If I was going to unravel this thing, I needed to start from the beginning. Not just memories but evidence. Birthday cards with my name missing. Christmas letters sent to extended family where I was barely mentioned. Year after year of subtle edits and emotional omissions. One box was labeled Family 2006 to 2010. Inside I found a scrapbook with carefully mounted photos. Emma's prom, her first car, a road trip they'd taken to the Grand Canyon. There was a small space in the album with a post-it note covering the corner. Underneath was a photo of me, standing in uniform beside my Humvee. The caption below had been blacked out with ink. What had I said or done to deserve being scratched out like that? Later I called my aunt, Mom's younger sister. She'd always been blunt, sometimes to a fault. "I need to ask you something," I said when she picked up. "Do you know why my family stopped including me in things?" "Really?" A long pause followed. "Oh honey," she said with a sigh. "You sure you want to hear it?" "I do. They resented you, Olivia. Not because of what you did, but because of how people saw you. Your mom felt like she couldn't compete. She was proud, sure, but also hurt. You went to war. He stayed home. And people admired you more than her." I swallowed hard. "And Dad? Your father's proud too. But he never knew how to talk to you once you started leading troops. He was a mechanic. Never saw war. Suddenly his daughter's getting medals, traveling the world, doing things he didn't understand. He shut down. And Emma? She was the collateral damage," my aunt said gently. "She hated how everyone called her Olivia's sister. She never got to be just Emma. Your parents tried to balance it by focusing more on her when you left. But over time, it became the norm. You became the distant figure in the background." That night I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and a notebook. It wasn't malice. That's what struck me most. They hadn't set out to hurt me. But they also hadn't tried not to. And that kind of negligence, it left wounds you didn't even realize you had, until you touched them and flinched. I scribbled a single question in my notebook. "Can you forgive people for forgetting you?" I didn't know the answer. The next day Emma asked if I wanted to drive with her to the lake. Just the two of us. We hadn't done that since college. We sat on the dock in silence for a while. The sun hovered above the water like it couldn't make up its mind whether to rise or set. "I read your commendation letters," she said suddenly. "You did?" "Yeah. I snuck into the storage room after you fell asleep. I didn't know half that stuff. What you'd done. Where you'd been." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "I guess I thought you left because you didn't want to be here," she continued. "But now I think maybe you left because no one really let you stay." The wind rustled the trees. "I didn't mean to steal anything from you, Em," I said softly. "I just wanted to serve." "I know," she whispered. "I know that now." We didn't cry. We didn't hug. But we sat there long enough for silence to become something healing. When we drove back, Mom was waiting at the kitchen table with 3 mugs of tea. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept in weeks. "I heard what you said to your father," she began, her voice shaky. "I meant it," I replied. "I know," she said. "And you were right." For the first time in years we talked, not about deployments or holidays missed, but about choices. About fear. About how sometimes loving someone isn't enough if you never show them that love when it matters most. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "We made it all about what we lost by you leaving. We never once asked what you were losing by coming home." I didn't have words, so I simply nodded. That night I added a second question to my notebook. Can you find your place in a family that forgot how to hold space for you? Maybe I could. Maybe this time. I wouldn't need to fight to be seen. The conversation with Dad left a sting that didn't fade overnight. I barely slept that night, replaying his words, dissecting them like old evidence. By morning, my jaw was sore from grinding my teeth, and my mind hadn't found peace, only sharper edges. I needed space, but space didn't fix betrayal. I needed understanding. And the only person left who might give me something unfiltered was Aunt Naomi. She wasn't blood, not technically. She was my mom's best friend. My godmother, my unofficial second parent when things got bad. And in the last few years I'd let that bond fray just like all the others. I hadn't called her in months. Maybe more. But I remembered how she used to say, "I'll always tell you the truth even if it stings." I hoped that promise still held. I texted her, not expecting much. But 2 minutes later she replied, "Come over. I've been waiting for you to ask." Her house hadn't changed since I was a kid. Same wind chimes on the porch, same stone path that cracked in winter and got fixed every spring. She opened the door before I even knocked. And then she just held me. Not like my mom's awkward shoulder squeeze or my dad's bracing hug. Naomi wrapped her arms around me and didn't let go until I stopped pretending I was okay. She made tea like she always did, with a slice of lemon and honey stirred counterclockwise. Some ritual she swore brought calm. We sat at her kitchen table and I spilled everything. No guards up. No military stoicism. Just me, tired and angry and confused. Naomi listened without blinking. Not once did she interrupt. And when I finished, she didn't start with excuses or defenses. Instead she said, "You were always the golden child. You just never realized how much that burned the rest of them." I blinked. The golden child. Me. She nodded. "You were smart, focused, determined. You knew what you wanted and went after it. But more than that, Olivia, you were your parents' pride. You gave them something to brag about. That's not my fault. Of course not. But when people are insecure, they don't need logic to feel wounded." Naomi leaned forward. "Your mom, she struggled a lot after you left. Not just emotionally. She felt abandoned. She told herself you chose the military over her. She wanted me to have a stable life. She did. But she also wanted to matter. And when you didn't call, didn't come home on holidays, even if it wasn't your fault, it fed something in her. Something old." I took a sip of tea. "And that fed everyone else too?" Naomi exhaled. "Your sister, she always felt like the backup singer in your life story." Her words, not mine. "You were the brave one, the achiever. She was the one who stayed behind, took care of things. And the more you rose, the smaller she felt. That's not what I wanted." "I know. But that's what they believed. The thing about clarity, it doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes it cuts deeper. Like realizing the enemy isn't malice. It's misunderstanding. Decades of it." I stayed at Naomi's until the sun dipped low, and before I left, she pressed an envelope into my hand. "I kept these," she said. "Letters from your mom. Some she never sent. Some she wrote just for herself. Maybe they'll help." That night, back in my guest room at Dad's house, I sat cross-legged on the floor and opened the envelope. The handwriting hit me like a punch, familiar, messy cursive with little curls on the Y's and S's. I hadn't seen her letters in years. The first was dated 2005. My first year overseas. She didn't call. But I guess the phone lines are down again. I still baked her favorite cake. Silly, I know. But I just needed to feel like she'd come home. The second, 2011. "She's doing big things. I'm proud. I really am. But I hate how quiet this house feels. Like she took the color with her." Another, from 2018. "Rachel called today to ask if Olivia was coming to the reunion. I told her no. I said she's too busy. What I didn't say is that I don't know how to talk to her anymore. Every time I see her on TV or in some press photo, I wonder, did we raise a hero or did we lose our daughter?" By the end, my hands were shaking. These weren't attack letters. They were love letters twisted by fear. By distance. By pride. The next day I called Rachel. I expected her to hang up. Or ignore it. But she picked up. "I read Mom's letters," I said. "Silence. I know we're broken. But I don't want to stay that way." Her voice cracked. I didn't know how to fix it. Me neither. But maybe we start by talking. Just us. No guilt. No history. Just sisters. That weekend we met at a diner halfway between her house and Dad's. She brought pictures of her kids. I brought a copy of my deployment scrapbook. We laughed, cried, talked about Mom, about what we remembered and what we didn't. And for the first time in years we saw each other, not as enemies or competition, but as two girls who lost their mom in different ways. It wasn't a miracle, but it was a start. Back at Dad's, I found him in the garage fixing up his old motorcycle. He looked up. Rachel called. Told me about the diner. I nodded. She said you two laughed. We did. He set down his wrench. I've got a box upstairs. Things your mom kept. Maybe you want to look through them. We stood in the silence for a moment. Not awkward, just unspoken things floating in the air. Then I said, I'm not re-enlisting. I'm staying this time. For good. His shoulders softened. That's good. Pause. We should do a barbecue, he added. Invite the family. Make it casual. No speeches. Just be together? Yeah. That night I stood in the backyard with a beer in hand watching the stars. The same backyard I used to play in. The same stars I used to wish on. I didn't have all the answers. The resentment wouldn't vanish overnight. Trust would take time. But for the first time in years I felt like I was home. Not because of the house. Not because of the town. But because I stopped pretending everything was fine, and started asking for the truth. Even when it hurt. Especially then. They say some truths can only be uncovered when the noise dies down, when the shouting stops and the doors close. I never believed that. I always thought resolution came with confrontation. Now I know better. It was late, maybe just past midnight, when I sat alone in the old family living room, the floor creaking beneath my boots, the faint smell of cold ashes from the fireplace still lingering. I'd stared so long at the family photo albums spread across the coffee table, the edges worn, fingerprints smudged into years of birthdays, Christmas mornings and graduations. Every single event, every moment. I wasn't in them. I finally understood. This wasn't about forgetting me. It was about removing me. A slow, calculated erasure. And it had worked. If I'd never returned, it would have been as if I'd never existed at all. But now I was here. And silence was no longer an option. Earlier that day I'd visited Aunt Deborah. Out of everyone in my family, she was the only one who had stayed neutral over the years. Never took sides. Never offered judgment. Just quiet, distant compassion. Her small apartment smelled of lavender and old books. We sat over weak coffee and I asked her directly, no sugarcoating, no small talk. Why did they shut me out? She sighed. Liv, it wasn't just them. It was you too. You left. And when you came back, you never really came back. Not emotionally. I clenched my jaw. That's not fair. Maybe not. But it's true. Her words sat like stones in my chest. She went on, your father especially. He took your enlistment as a rejection. He didn't understand why you needed to go. And your mother? She followed his lead. I thought they were proud of me. They were. But pride and pain coexist. You leaving triggered something neither of them ever addressed. And with every deployment, every missed event, their silence became easier. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, but I blinked it back. They never asked me to stay. They were too proud. Back home that night I found Mom in the kitchen. Alone. Stirring a cup of tea she'd never drink. Can we talk? I asked. She didn't answer, just gestured toward the chair across from her. I know what happened now, I began. And I'm not here to accuse anyone. I just want to understand. She stared at the swirling steam rising from her mug. Understand what? That we were angry? That we felt abandoned? Yes. Her hands trembled as she set the cup down. Your father was raised to believe family came before everything. And when you left, when you chose the military over us, he couldn't forgive it. I inhaled sharply. That's not fair. I chose a purpose. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I know. But he didn't. And over time, it became easier to tell ourselves you didn't want to be involved. So we stopped inviting. Stopped updating. We let the distance justify itself. It was brutal honesty, and I preferred it over the lies. But why didn't you stop it? I asked. She looked up and her eyes were wet. Because I didn't want to lose him too. He already resented you. I didn't want him to resent me too. That night I took a long walk through the neighborhood. So much had changed. New fences, new neighbors. The playground where I'd scraped my knees as a child was gone, replaced by a sleek dog park. And yet, beneath the newness, the silence remained the same. I thought about my siblings. How they'd grown up in my absence. How jealousy had brewed between us, unspoken but potent. My medals became insults. My rank, a symbol of arrogance. I had never meant to climb above them, but that's how they saw it. Every deployment, every letter with my title signed in bold, became another reminder that I was out there doing something bigger than birthday parties or family dinners. I would have given anything to be seen. Not just as Captain Olivia Knight, but as Liv. The daughter. Sister. The one who came back. The next morning I went to see Derek, my older brother. He opened the door slowly, wariness etched across his face. His toddler peeked from behind his leg wide-eyed. "Can we talk?" I asked. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, then stepped aside. His living room was cozy, cluttered with toys. A framed photo of his wedding day sat on the mantel. I wasn't in it. I'd been overseas. "I never meant to miss everything," I said. "I was doing what I thought was right." He nodded slowly. "We know. But it felt like you left us behind." "I didn't. It's not about intent, Liv. It's about how it landed. You weren't there for Mom's surgery. You missed Emma's graduation. Hell, you didn't even know Dad was sick. That one cut deep. No one told me." He looked away. "We didn't know if you'd even come." I would have. But by then, we didn't believe that anymore. I left his house with my heart torn in two. There was no villain here. No cruel mastermind. Just years of missed conversations, wounded pride, and unspoken grief. But there was also a way forward. The next day I invited everyone to the old family house. No pressure. No confrontations. Just presents. I cooked. Nothing fancy, just the same chili Dad used to make. The house filled with the scent of cumin and tomatoes and memories. They came. Hesitantly. Quietly. But they came. We ate. We laughed, awkwardly at first. And somewhere between bites of cornbread and shared glances, something shifted. Derek showed me pictures of his daughter learning to walk. Emma talked about her college thesis. Mom even brought out old albums and passed them around. This time no one skipped the pages I was in. And when silence did come, it wasn't the sharp kind. It was warm. Later that evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Mom rested her hand on mine. "I'm sorry," she said. "Me too." In that moment I realized forgiveness isn't loud. It doesn't come with speeches or grand gestures. It comes in shared meals, quiet touches, and the willingness to stay, even when it's uncomfortable. I came home expecting to confront them. But what I really needed was to reconnect with them. And now finally the healing could begin. It was raining when I stepped outside the courthouse. Cold and steady, like the kind of rain that never lets up, just enough to soak your collar, not enough to stop the day. I held the small box of documents under my coat. It wasn't much, just a few notarized pages, some emails printed for record, and an old photograph I'd brought for strength. My uniform cap, still damp from the drizzle, felt heavier than it should have. Like it knew the weight of everything I'd just heard. Inside I had sat through 3 hours of family mediation. Not legal warfare. Just fucking. Legally required, formally observed, and entirely voluntary. But I'd fought wars with fewer emotional casualties than what happened in that room. It began with small, clipped answers from my brother Matt. He didn't want to be there, you could tell. Arms crossed, legs bouncing nervously, eyes fixed on the clock instead of me. My mother sat beside him, her expression unreadable. Not cold. Not angry. Just distant. As if she'd accepted something long ago that I hadn't. The mediator asked us to start with what we were hoping to resolve. I said I wanted honesty. I didn't expect apologies or even understanding. I just wanted someone, anyone, to look me in the eye and tell me why I wasn't invited to my niece's graduation. Why I didn't know about my father's funeral until 2 days after it happened. Why I became an invisible branch of the family tree while I was overseas wearing their name on my chest. Matt was the first to speak. "Because you made us feel small," he said. That sentence knocked the wind out of me. Not because I didn't see it coming, but because I suddenly realized how deeply resentment had settled into our bones. "You left," he added. "Not just for a year. For years. You missed every birthday, every holiday. And when you did show up, it was with medals and stories about Afghanistan and Iraq and people we never met. I opened my mouth to respond, but Mom raised her hand. No, she said quietly. Let him finish. Matt's voice cracked as he continued. You always came home like you were the hero. Maybe you were. But we were the ones here. Watching Dad die slowly. Helping me through a divorce. Holding down holidays without knowing if you were dead or alive. Tears gathered in his eyes, but he didn't wipe them away. And then you came back and expected everything to just pick up again. Like nothing changed. Like you were still the center. I'd been prepared for anger. For blame. Even for guilt. But I hadn't prepared for this kind of honesty. It sliced through me like a whisper against scarred skin. I waited for Mom to speak next, and when she did, her words were quieter still. I loved your letters, she said. I kept every one. But sometimes I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say. Your world became something I didn't recognize. And I didn't want you to know how jealous I was. Of your strength. Your clarity. Your sense of purpose. That shattered me more than any insult could have. You were brave, she said. I was just here. Being a mom. Being small. The silence after that was deafening. Back in my apartment later that night, I sat on the floor beside the heater, letting the warmth seep into my knees while I read through the court-approved family statement we'd written. It wasn't legally binding. Just something the mediator suggested we create. A summary of mutual truths. A document we could go back to when things got hard again. It began simply. We are a family that let silence grow louder than love. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I folded the paper, placed it in the box beside my medals, and closed the lid. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a stranger in my own life. Just human. Flawed. Tired. And strangely lighter. 2 weeks later, I was in uniform again. But not for war. This time it was a Veterans Day event at my niece Lila's school. She'd personally asked me to speak. Said she wanted her friends to meet the coolest person I know who also jumps out of planes. The auditorium was packed. Small town banners hung like paper armor from the ceiling. Middle schoolers sat cross-legged on the floor, fidgeting, bored but curious. When I stepped up to the mic, I didn't talk about combat. Or medals. Or sacrifice. I talked about family. I wore the uniform because I believed in protecting something bigger than myself, I said. But I forgot that sometimes, the biggest things are the people right next to you. The ones who stay behind. The ones who carry on. There was a pause. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is come home. Even when you know the welcome won't be easy. I saw my brother in the back of the room. His arms weren't crossed this time. He gave me a small nod. I nodded back. We weren't fixed. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But something had shifted. That night I returned to the family home for dinner. The table had changed since my childhood. No more place settings with name cards. No more silent tensions simmering beneath mashed potatoes. Just food. Laughter. Small steps. My mother served dessert and placed an extra slice of pie in front of me. For all the birthdays we missed, she said with a weak smile. I smiled back. You're only making up for 21 years. I've got time, she replied. And somehow I believed her. Later in my old bedroom I sat beside the window. The rain had started again, tapping gently against the glass. The same kind of rain as the courthouse. But it didn't feel heavy anymore. I opened the drawer beside my bed and pulled out one of the letters I'd sent home from my second deployment. Folded into a neat square, still smelling faintly of dust and diesel. I reread it. Not because I missed the war, but because I wanted to remember who I was then. And who I'd become now. A soldier. Sister. A daughter. A ghost once, perhaps. But no longer. Sometimes coming home isn't the end of the journey. It's the battlefield you never trained for. But I fought. And this time, I didn't come back invisible.